Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, April 15th, 2008 meeting of the Town of Orange Planning and Zoning Commission. Before we begin tonight's proceedings, I'd like to point out the location of our emergency exits to our one person in the audience. The first one is to my right, your left, in the middle of the room. The second two, again, are to my right, your left, in the hallway at the rear of the building, rear of the room, rather. The first one immediately upon entering the hallway on your left, and the final exit is at the end of that hallway. I'd like to ask those seated at the table to introduce themselves.
Rick Miangioni.
Ozzie Parenti.
Judy Smith-Morgan.
Paul Denise, Zoning Administrator and Enforcement Officer.
I'm Commissioner Walter Clark. Commissioner Paul Kaplan is due to arrive shortly. He was held up. In light of that, I'd like to ask for motion to move number 1 on the agenda to the 6th position and all the other numbers subsequent.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Therefore, the first item we'll discuss is a review of the minutes from the April 1, 2008 meeting. I had two things. On page 2, under old business, it was when we were discussing the House bill that was forwarded to us and the town planner, and it says, the minutes read, Chairman Clark stated that according to planning consultant Brian Miller, no action was necessary concerning the House bill concerning conservation development. I think we should insert the words "at this time," because what's happening is that bill is working its way through the process. So, when it goes through, we may have to take action. On page 4, when we're dealing with the site plan application for 363 Boston Post Road, in the third paragraph, the fourth sentence, it reads, Chairman Clark believes that the drive-it should continue along the distance of the building. That should specify the east elevation of the building. Those are the only observations I have from those minutes. Nothing? Any other observations or changes? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the Tuesday, April 1st, 2008 minutes as amended.
Do we have a
I'll
motion?
second the motion.
It's been seconded. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Passes 4-0. Oh, I'm sorry.
I showed up at 7:30.
Okay. So a partial abstention. Okay. I don't know how we record that, but it's on the record. The next item on the agenda is a Section 824 referral. This is a request for the abandonment of Taft Road. As you all recall, at our last meeting, we abandoned a portion of it, and Paul can fill us in on the details here.
Yeah, in reviewing the abandonment of the road, the Board of Selectmen were in favor of abandoning the entire road. I made a copy of our assessment map here so you can see exactly which portion that is.
Okay. I think we're all familiar with it, though.
Is the town going to do the survey then, or?
I'm not quite sure. This portion of road here between Hadley and Taft. The portion of road between Hadley and Taft. We already abandoned this portion.
Yeah.
Small
Yeah,
portion,
Paul,
we're looking
just to
do
bring
the
it to
rest.
date, this is the Board of Selectmen has asked to abandon the balance of that road. So that's what's before us now. So and the survey that Rick may have referred to, that's the Board of Selectmen to do that. That's their decision. We just have to decide if it's a good thing for the town or not, and if we want to.
This is Taft Road here, and it's between Hadley and Omen. So we already abandoned this portion. and now they're seeking to abandon from here to here.
Okay.
So then the property owners that abut it will get 50% and then pay taxes based upon their new real estate.
That's right, they're going to have
Yep.
to get the tax bills cut up.
They're going to have to get the tax bills cut up. The assessor will go out there and do some work.
What happens in the case, I mean, doesn't make any difference to us, but what happens if the case of one neighbor, for instance, doesn't want the additional land? Does it all get deferred to the other?
That's an option.
Okay.
They'll be notified.
I think it may have to go out to bid, I'm not quite sure, because it's public land.
Okay, yeah,
I'm not sure.
okay. Either way, it's, yeah, it doesn't affect our, I think this would be a benefit to the town. Let's, you know, we can eliminate that possibility of that road being constructed, which would certainly be a benefit to the town. Is anybody prepared to make a motion?
Is that part of our agenda tonight, or no?
Yes, it is. It's the it's the third item on the agenda.
It's an 8-24 referral
So we
from
just
Board
have
of
to give a
Selectmen.
favorable, that we're in favor of this action.
I'll make a motion that at least the board is in favor of the Section 824 referral, the request for the abandonment of the balance of Taft Road.
We have a motion.
Second?
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is old business. Does anybody have anything they'd like to bring up under old business? There being none, we'll move on to new business. Is there anything that anybody would like to bring up under new business? There being none, we'll move on to the report of the zoning enforcement officer.
Tammy was out of the office today, and I had numerous meetings, so I've been mostly in the office all week, but I did make a sweep of signs. I called the Public Works Department, but it was too late in the day to remove 2 signs that were out there, but they will be removed tomorrow. Scheduled tomorrow, I will be making an inspection at the cemetery located off Derby Milford Road. And also at the Sunrise Hill Estates and the active adult community site.
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah. At our last meeting, Judy inquired about the trash at Target.
Yeah, I did contact the manager, and they will be cleaning that up, or they may have already, I'm not quite sure, I have to go out and check on that.
Yeah, I haven't been over recently to check.
Okay. Any news on the Red River Grill?
No, Fred was,
Process.
I think Fred was out of the office today, but we'll
Okay.
talk to him tomorrow. on
You
that.
mean in terms of opening up the diner?
Well, you know, as you may have noticed, there's been some substantial revisions, and that never came before us.
We never got a site plan
Oh,
for the renovations and modifications.
They just
to the
went ahead and
facade.
did it. So,
how do you, is that a cease and desist, or what do they do?
Well, there was a permit issued, but it was work that may have went beyond what was approved, so.
that's a little more than paint.
I stopped down there a few times, and there was no one there. I mean, they just stopped working.
But now
a
they've
couple
seemed to
times.
be,
Yeah.
I saw some advertisements.
So I want to match up,
Local
I want to match up on what's on the building permit. I know I did initial that,
okay.
so.
Paul, on you mentioned the cemetery that's being constructed over on Derby Milford. Did we approve another entrance there on Derby Milford?
think
With a
there was.
700?
Not an entrance, it was,
It's an
is to be used as an
exit
exit, and it will be gated.
Yeah, there was another.
They also had an issue in the back about a collapsed arch.
Yes.
Was that, did they bring in plans where they gonna reconstruct that?
I know Scott's handling that. He
Okay.
was out there today on that, and I was out there last week. You call it an arch, but it's actually a stone culvert that was built by
Yeah,
hand.
whatever you wanna call it.
It's pretty impressive. It's too bad it kind of collapsed, but
Right.
I know Scott is handling that, and he was even out there today on that.
And Paul, there was an issue with a building on Lambert Road also, not a building, a business rather, on Lambert Road. How's that proceeding?
The abatement order terminated on Thursday or Friday. I was only able to drive by, I couldn't stop, but I'm going to go there after hours, and there was one trailer I was concerned about. There's a boat trailer that is set back, and obviously it's not related to the business, but there's one other white trailer there, and it was my recollection that it was used in terms of the business, so.
But in general, the
I don't want to say they're in compliance, but there has been a decrease in activity
Okay.
there.
Yeah, so at least they're being cooperative, I should say. Okay. Is there anything else, Paul? Does anybody else have any questions for Paul? Okay, now we're going to go back to, Paul thought he missed it. Now we'd like to review the sign regulations, the proposal. I think I've included all of the comments that were issued by Brian Miller and also by the town attorney and incorporated them into the proposal. I made a couple small changes since the last time we did it, so I'd like to kind of go through them, the changes that we have right before us. The first thing I did was I changed last time Brian Miller suggested that we define aggregate, have a definition of it in our regulation, and I had initially just defined it in general terms. But then I thought that it might be better to address it in a little bit more specific terms. You know, aggregate has a couple different definitions, even in a dictionary. I mean, you know, it can be a combination of things. It can be meant to use for stone and things like that. So I put in the following, because we use it in one context in our regulations, and that is to describe a two-sided sign. So I just wanted that to be clear. So I'm proposing that we include the definition within Article 14, which is our sign regulations. Of these regulations, the term aggregate is used to describe the combined viewable area of any sign that is viewable from two sides. Yeah, that may not be the exact definition that you'd find in a dictionary, but it does define the way we use it within the regulations. And with that in mind, and we'll get to this a little bit later on, but I'd just like to point out in existing C, 383-188C, the last sentence, it reads, exterior signs attached to or mounted on a building shall not have an aggregate area greater than 15%. In that instance, we're not using it to describe the two-sided sign, so I did propose to change that wording in the regulations. We'll get to that afterwards, but that's why I eliminated it. You'll see what I'm talking about later on when we go through. Again, Brian suggested that we have a description of a window signs, and we reviewed this at our last meeting. So that should be all said unless anybody has any suggestions. Again, we may want to change the definition of temporary signs, but I think that's something we should address as we go through the public hearing, because we'll have a better definition of what we're going to have then.
Do we have a date for the public hearing?
Well, the first thing we have to do is we'll go through these regulation proposals, and then it's up to the commission if they decide if we want to go forward with these proposals. If we decide to go forward with them, then Paul has to send it out for referrals and then schedule the public hearing. And there's provisions in here, I should say, with the temporary signs that I can't say that I'm fully in favor of, at least at this point, but it was a major issue that was brought up in a lot of the discussions, so I felt that we had to address them in the regulation, and I tried to draft a regulation that reflected the concerns that were expressed to us in the different meetings that we've had. My decision will be made at the public hearing whether I'm in favor of actually going through with them, but I felt it was important that we include them because these were issues that were, paramount to some of the businesses in town. If we go to the next page, we have prohibited signs, and there's some wording changes there where it reads, no banner, pennant, captive balloon, streamer, ribbon, or sculpture shall be permitted in any district except as permitted in 383-190A. And I think we should also reference 383-188A3, so you might want to put a little footnote there. And again, as we go through the public hearings, this may change, it may be eliminated, the need to refer to these things, but these are areas where we may be permitting banners, for instance. So that's why I refer to these other regulations in this portion of it. We go on to window signs, and that proposal is window signs shall not exceed 35% of the total window area for each business viewable from a public street or from a parking area, subject to C herein, and that refers back to an existing regulation C, which had to do with the, I can read it actually, with the obstructions, that's no sign shall be located or maintained. If you recall, we had a discussion about that. It reads, no sign shall be located or maintained so as to be a hazard to traffic or pedestrians or to obstruct any door, window, ventilation system, fire escape, and so on. So I addressed that in the proposal. And then we also addressed, or proposing to address, window sign location. Window signs are prohibited from placement on the outer side of any window. Are there any questions or changes or objections to those proposals? Okay. We'll move on to the proposed amendment to 383-187A2, and this would be an addition to this to 383-187-2, and that would be changing the wording in D to temporary commercial signs for work or services being performed on site, and that's to more clearly define the type of temporary signs that we're talking about within the district. That's within the residential district, because that was brought up as a question, so that just tells exactly what we're dealing with here with that proposal. And then also to have a 383-187A4, which would read, notice and warning signs, sign noting the existence of burglar and/or fire alarms, dog fences, etc., not to exceed 1 square foot or 2 square feet in aggregate. This, again, came from discussions I've had with some people who raised the question of whether this is advertising or not, so just to get it out in the open, I mean, we're certainly not going to have Paul go out and attempt to knock on every door and remove burglar alarms. Plus, I think they do serve a purpose, you know.
Yeah, plus the dog, the signs for the perimeter.
Invisible fence, yeah.
The invisible fence.
Whatever, yeah. I think they serve a purpose, so that's why I included the notice that we do allow that, so it just doesn't come up into question again.
Bo, on the proposed 383-187A2D, there's a word there that I'm curious about. It says the temporary signs shall be removed within 7 days after the conclusion of the event or enterprise the sign is promoting.
Like a roofer or something,
Yes,
there's construction at the house,
yeah.
so within a week, the sign has to be removed.
that part. What's the word enterprise?
Well, I'm sorry. What is the word enterprise? Is that what is intended to be the construction?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm open to
Yeah,
suggestions if
maybe
we want to have a
should
better
think of
word.
another word.
Maybe we can say the construction, well, it's not just construction, though, I
Project?
understand. The project may be a better catch-all word. I understand you're trying to be broad on that as well.
So we should just be the conclusion of the event or project, or just project?
No, I think the event or project, you want to be
Okay.
as broad, but enterprise,
Okay, yeah.
um,
So we'll change that to project. So that will read, temporary commercial signs for work or services being performed on-site shall be removed within 7 days after the conclusion of the event or project the sign is promoting. Should be that the sign is promoting?
yeah,
What's contemplated by an event? What kind of?
You know, I don't know where I got that wording from, to be honest. I'm looking at the, actually, what I did was I just inserted this, that's the current wording, and all I did was really insert the portion after signs for work or services being performed on site. I just interjected that phrase into that sentence. So the existing regulation reads, temporary commercial signs shall be removed within 7 days after the conclusion of the event or enterprise the sign is promoting.
I got to tell you, we could certainly be consistent with that and just say, for worker services,
That's what you should do.
right.
Well, the event doesn't consider work.
You should just say temporary commercial signs for work or services being performed on the site shall be removed within 7 days after the work or services are completed.
After the, should we be, after the conclusion
Of the worker services.
of the,
Yeah, but the event, is this just referring to commercial work? An event wouldn't be work. It would be something like the fairgrounds.
Right, I don't think event is an appropriate
That's
That's
not
not what
word.
he's contemplating,
Okay.
because what he just said was that this is basically the what was in the regulations to begin with.
that the sign is promoting. Okay, what about 383-17A4 about the warning signs? Any concerns or questions with that? Okay. If you look at 383-188A1, the first, well, A1, it says signs permitted in a residential district. I think we discussed this before, and it best to just eliminate that reference, because we have we don't want to just refer back to that because it has different signs that we would allow. So I think it's best that we eliminate that. And at 383-188A2, there's a misprint in our existing regulations. They use the word acid when it should be and. So now's the time to correct that. And then we have the proposed amendments that would allow for temporary signs. And that would be listed as 383-188A3, which we already have temporary signs, but this just goes into a different definition. So the proposal is to amend that. And then, and temporary signs, provided that a permit be required for all temporary signs. B, temporary signs advertising a commercial sales event or promotion may be posted for a period of 10 days. That should be probably not more than 10 days.
No, not more than.
Not. C, no commercial establishment shall be granted more than one temporary sign permit per allowed time. In other words, they can't have multiple, they wouldn't be able to have multiple temporary signs at one time. No commercial establishment shall be granted more than 3 temporary sign permits in a single calendar year. And again, these are things that we will fine tune during the course of the public hearing. Or perhaps eliminate altogether or expand on either, it just depends on what we decide. No temporary sign shall exceed 8 square feet or 16 square feet in aggregate. Temporary sign shall be designed to be stable under all weather conditions, including high winds. G, no temporary sign shall obstruct or impair a public sidewalk, public or private street or driveway, traffic control sign, fire hydrant, or otherwise create a hazard to public safety. H, temporary signs must be of a height, size, and location that does not have a negative effect on the health, safety, and welfare of other commercial enterprises or the residents of the town of Orange. I, temporary signs may not be placed within 12 feet of any public roadway or within the public right-of-way. And J, temporary signs determined to be in violation of 383-188A3, F, G, H, and I by town officials are subject to removal by the town of Orange without notice. I put those in there because those F, G, H, and I are direct safety concerns. So I don't think we should have to have Paul go out and give notice and 24-hour, advance notice. If it's something that's truly a threat to the public, it should be taken away immediately.
I think you want the word or instead of and there.
Yes, you're right, okay. Okay. Then we go on to the proposed amendment to 383-188C. And this came about when Mr. Miller was reviewing the terms in 383-188C and found them to be, and actually pointed them out to be somewhat confusing because we addressed the signs in the local shopping center, the commercial districts, the light industrial districts, and the office park district, and there's different heights that are allowed in both the LSC and the commercial districts have one set, and the LI and office park districts have another set. So he suggested that we split them, which is what I'm proposing that we do. So the first one would be C, LSC, and, there's a misprint there, and C, number, height, and area, except as permitted, and it really kind of just incorporates the same wording here, except for the part about aggregate, which I spoke to earlier, but it would read, except as permitted under subsection A, there shall be on any lot no more than one sign attached to the ground. There shall be no more than 2 exterior signs attached to or mounted on a building for each occupancy. Any sign attached to the ground shall not exceed an area of 100 square feet or 200 square feet in aggregate, or a height of 25 feet. Any sign attached to the ground, on any sign attached to the ground, no portion of the display element shall extend below a height of 10 feet unless less than a height of 3 feet. Any sign attached to or mounted on a building shall not extend above the top of the wall to which it is attached or mounted. Exterior signs attached to or mounted on a building shall not have, and this is where I eliminated the word aggregate from this regulation, and change it to read, shall not have a total combined area greater than 15% of the area of the wall to which they are attached or mounted. And I want to come back to this because I'll read the proposed D to deal with the light industrial and office park district, and then I want to come back to something in C. In the LI and OP district, number, height, and area, except as permitted under subsection A, there shall be on any lot no more than one sign attached to the ground. There shall be no more than 2 exterior signs attached to or mounted on a building for each occupancy. Any sign attached to the ground shall not exceed an area of 100 square feet or 200 square feet in aggregate, or a height of 15 feet. Any sign attached to or mounted on a building shall not extend above the top of the wall to which it is attached or mounted. Exterior signs attached to or mounted on a building shall not have a total combined area of greater than 15%, and there again, I remove the word aggregate and put in the total combined area. Greater than 15% of the area of the wall to which they are attached or mounted. And here is where I've incorporated Paul's suggestion, because he mentioned that virtually anybody in the light industrial district in particular that comes in with a ground sign, 3 feet, they all seek a variance. So he said, we should, let's make it something realistic. So what I'm proposing that we do, and I got Paul's advice on this to what the height would be. So it goes on to say, any sign attached to the ground, no portion of the display area element shall extend below a height of 10 feet unless less than a height of 5 feet. So we're allowing them 5 feet. But I felt it was important that we put a couple conditions on that, and that's what those 2 bullet points are. And they are that the commission finds that the height, size, and location do not have a negative effect on the health, safety, and welfare of other commercial enterprises or residents of the town of Orange. So it can't be blocking another commercial enterprise, for instance, or creating a line of sight problem, that we can address that. And also, the police chief or his designee has reviewed the height, size, and location of the sign. That was wording that Mr. Miller kind of
Reviewed and approved?
Well, he didn't know, that's how I originally had it, and he didn't necessarily think that we wanted to have the approval, that we really just wanted to have his comments, if I'm correct.
I think the reason that being is that if it were to state approve, it kind of takes away from your authority a little bit.
That's kind of how he said,
If we have negative comments from him, we'll have the option to do whatever we see fit.
right, and that's why Brian didn't think that we needed to have the approval from the police department, just his review, and then we could act on it accordingly.
What is the concept of the difference between the LSC and the C versus the LI and the OP, in terms of the 15 feet versus the 25 feet?
What is the concept behind, the
Yeah,
thought behind it?
why the difference?
You'll have to ask somebody that was here before me.
Well, the thinking was that the Post Road is a very dense and very developed district, where the light industrial districts are located on Marshall Road. There's more distance between the buildings. It's not usually the individuals that are trying to get to that destination are not doing it at retail, that they're people that are familiar with these sites. And I think also that over the course of the years, and even the commission realized this somewhat, is that the lower signs tended to give a more campus-like or professional impression and visibility out there, rather than having a very high-standing sign that probably wouldn't even function any better than the low-lying one. Virtually, I'm going to say virtually every light industrial user up on Marshall Road has at some point gone to the ZBA for a waiver, because they all like the monolithic type signs.
And if we make these 2 changes, then the existing D, which has its own standards, would have to be renamed E, obviously. Going back to C, during the discussion, I can't remember which meeting it was. I think it was maybe at the Chamber of Commerce meeting. There was a gentleman that proposed, we were discussing the temporary signs and the pluses and minuses of having those signs along the post road. And there was a person in attendance that suggested that perhaps we include an area on the pylon sign for a sale area. So if a store in that particular development wanted to have a sale, they put up their temporary sale sign on the pylon sign, which at first I thought was a great idea. When I met with Mr. Metzger, is it, from Sinorama? and I mentioned that idea to him, he pointed out that, first of all, you have to have kind of a custom-made sign to do that, which is more expensive than a temporary sign. And also, you typically would have to get somebody with a bucket truck to come in and put the sign in place and then come down and take it down, which would obviously make this not a very practical solution. But I just thought about this evening, and there's a lot of electronic signs now, even the billboards that are coming out, the LED billboards that you see on the side of the highway. So I don't think it's too much to imagine that we could incorporate an area on a pylon sign, because if the developer wanted to include that type of signs, I'm not saying that they will, but perhaps we should address it in our regulations now to present that option for different developers. So what I think we may want to propose is to have a bullet point on the bottom of C, or just incorporate it into the paragraph, something to the effect of: an additional area of up to 10 square feet or 20 square feet in aggregate may be provided on the sign. This additional area to be used only for promotional use in accordance with the provisions of 388-188A3, which is the different restrictions for time and so forth that we put on the temporary signs. And again, that could be fine-tuned during the course of the public hearing.
Are you envisioning the signs that are lit?
Yes.
I'm not sure that the town wants to go down that route. I think Route 1 is very commercialized, but I think that just brings a whole nother flavor to it.
I don't mean the motion ones though necessarily. I mean, they have some that are, now they have some that are. I don't know how we would regulate it, or if we could regulate it, I guess.
You're
But
envisioning
that
the
would- what
billboard
a-
type signs.
Excuse me?
The billboard type signs.
But obviously a smaller version, yeah.
Wait, you're gonna increase the sign square footage from 100 square feet to 120 or 110.
110, 120, if that's an aggregate, so that's two-sided. So 110 square feet. But only for that purpose. And this is just a thought. I mean, if the commission doesn't feel that this would be appropriate, either at this time or in general, then we don't go forward with it.
At the current time, we only permit reader boards. We don't permit any electronics. My fear is how to police that it could be represented that these things aren't going to change.
Right, it's gonna
Every
be a
5
sign.
minutes or 10 minutes.
Okay.
And, once it's there, it could be difficult. And-
Okay, so we scratch that idea.
That's just
If we
my
were
feeling.
Vegas, I think it would work.
What's that?
As
That was the
We're
thought.
trying to accomplish something that the merchant said they would like.
Well, that's what, I was.
If you want to reserve an area for a special promotion, that can be up there, or even the reader board.
Well, this would actually not, the reason I even proposed that was because I thought that with an electronic sign, obviously, there's little or no cost to doing it if it was developed properly.
My only concern is the changing of wording, and
Yeah.
and what intervals, and,
Okay,
because we'll get into that for sure. It
Oh,
could be
without a doubt.
It could be a nightmare.
It's just gonna end up being a 110-foot square sign, because they're really not gonna change it.
well, they would, if they
Yeah.
had to provide for a 388, 188C, that has the time limitation. So if you go
Right.
down and you see this, and it's not within the provisions of 388, 188A3, then obviously the same procedure would happen. You'd have to tell them, stop and so forth. But I'm gathering the commission, this is not a good idea,
Well,
especially at this time.
yeah, I think you're opening up a door that we don't envision all the problems that are going to
Yeah,
ensue.
I think Paul's got a good handle on what kind of issues that would.
Okay.
So we do permit manual reader boards, and a couple merchants have taken advantage of that.
I think if there's
Where it
a
has to be
groundswell
changed manually.
of
So-
these kinds of signs, and we'll have to deal with it. But I don't necessarily want to open that door until they're knocking.
Sounds good. Okay, so we have the other few changes proposed to C and the changing of D and then the rewording of existing D to E. Does anybody have any other issues with those proposals that are before you? Okay. We'll move on to proposed 383, 188F, and that is to a proposal to specifically address real estate signs. And the proposal reads, or currently reads, real estate signs. The following restrictions are enforced in order to promote the health, safety, and welfare of other commercial enterprises or the residents of the town of Orange. That one sign be allowed per lot. Real estate sign, number 2, real estate signs advertising the sale or lease or rental of space shall be no greater than, and this is something that we brought up last time, the having them down to the size of what is a typical residential real estate sign.
Right, and I did get some feedback from a couple of the realtors who were screaming that they would be resisting of that. They quoted other local towns that have not had that kind of restriction in terms of size.
Okay.
So
What I'd like to do is, I'd like to put it forward with this restriction. We can, during the course of public hearing, raise it up, and it's your...
Invite them to come to the public hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're typically, when you have these regulations, you're typically advised to, during the course of public hearing, to make it less restrictive as opposed to more restrictive. So if we start tight, we can loosen it up as we go. It's better to proceed in that fashion than to have it large and decide we want it smaller. That's, not the right way to proceed. And when we do the public notice,
We had to become less.
less restrictive, not more restrictive. So if we start with a very restrictive size and go up, then we're, complying with that thought. So that's the size I'd like to put forward to start with, and then we'll see how the public hearing goes. Number 3, real estate signs advertising the lease or rental of a building. And keep in mind that from Mr. Marino's advice, we can't have separate real estate regulations for commercial district versus residential district. So these would apply to everybody. Real estate signs advertising the lease or rental of a building or space within a building cannot be put in place prior to 60 days before the expiration of the existing lease or rental agreement, and must be removed within 5 working days after a lease, rental, or sale of the property in order to promote the health, safety, and welfare of other commercial enterprises or residents of the town of Orange. Number 4, in the event of a sale of a property, real estate signs must be removed within 5 working days after a closing,
what is a working day?
Monday through Friday.
Not if you're a realtor. Okay.
Number 5, signs may not be located whereby its position, shape, or color may interfere with or obstruct the view or be confused with any authorized traffic sign, signal, or device. Location of the sign is subject to the approval of the zoning enforcement officer, building inspector, police department, or fire department. Number 6, real estate signs advertising the lease or rental of a property must be registered. A registration form must be filed with the zoning enforcement officer with the following information: an accurate description of the proposed sign confirming that it conforms to the restrictions of 383-188E2, which is the size, identification of the space that is being advertised, the date of expiration of the existing lease or rental agreement, and the proposed location of the sign on the lot. Are there any concerns?
On
or-
the provision number 5, the location of the sign is subject to the approval of the zoning enforcement officer, building inspector, police department, or fire. That doesn't mean they have to approve every one.
Right.
It's, okay. It's just if there's a problem, one of these individuals could,
Correct. In other words, the intent was that if the police department, for instance, had a problem with it, he could pull the plug on it. If the fire department had a problem with it, he could pull the plug on it. Any other questions or concerns with that aspect? We move on to the proposed, and this would be under a special exception, 383-190A. And this would be read temporary signs or banners as permitted under 383-1872. Temporary signs or banners used to identify or promote a business while an application for a permanent conforming sign has been filed and the application is pending. Temporary signs or banners used to identify or promote a business while an approved permanent sign is under construction, not to exceed 30 days without approval of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And temporary signs or banners approved by the commission advertising the grand opening of a commercial enterprise that shall be posted no more than 30 days. By practice, we've allowed banners to go up in certain circumstances, when a business is being refurbished or the sign's being refurbished. When it's a new business, we've allowed this type of thing. This is just an attempt to codify with them within the regulations. Are there any suggested changes or amendments to this proposed? this area of the proposal. We'll move on to the proposed 383190B, and this is to deal with construction signs, which again is something that we typically allow, but is not reflected in our regulations. So the proposal is, would read, construction signs erected in connection with an approved development. The following restrictions are enforced in order to promote the health, safety, and welfare of other commercial enterprises or the residents of the town of Orange. 1 temporary construction sign per street front not to exceed 32 square feet in area. Temporary construction signs may not be erected closer than 12 feet from any public roadway or within the public right-of-way. Temporary construction signs must be of a height, size, and location that does not have a negative effect on the health, safety, and welfare of other commercial enterprises or the residents of the town of Orange. That's just a footnote on there, that should be eliminated. Number 4, no temporary sign shall obstruct or impair a public sidewalk or public or private street or driveway, traffic control sign, fire hydrant, or otherwise create a hazard to public safety. Temporary construction signs shall be designed to be stable under all weather conditions, including high winds. Temporary construction signs to be in violation of 383190B34. That should be changed to from and to or 5 by town officials are subject to be removed by the town of Orange without notice. Development and construction signs may not be displayed until after. This is something that we may want to discuss at this point even. Development of construction signs may not be displayed until after the issuance of a building permit and must be removed within 24 hours after the issuance of a final CEO. Do we want to change that until after zoning approval?
Talking about in terms of when they can put it up.
Correct.
Well, why would they need a building permit? I mean, what happens if he doesn't build for 4 years?
So what Bo's getting to is the situation, let's say, on the Fieldview Farms, is that what it's called up there? On 121 and 34?
No, it's Fieldstone Village, is it?
Fieldstone Village?
Yeah.
But they're not going to be building for quite some time, but they're going to be advertising and having signs up.
Right.
They don't have a permit yet, and they're already advertising.
Well, that's
That's what he's getting at.
yeah, that's what we're kind of getting at. How do we want to
For
address
zoning
that?
approval? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what if you look at, say, the Stu Leonard sign has been up there for a few years now. If we had it under building permit, well, he wouldn't be allowed to have that sign. So I guess it's, we really have to tie it with something,
I would take building permit out and use zoning.
zoning approval.
Right.
Okay.
You want to have them give the ability to inform the public, it's going to coming in, September 2008 or whatever
Right,
is coming.
okay.
But, for Paul, when they put these signs up, do they give you a call before you dig number? Because if they don't have a building permit, they really don't need the number.
No, I usually get them. I usually run about, I'm going to say,
I mean, usually they're close to the sidewalk. I don't know if you want to require it.
no, it's more, isn't that more of a function though, of the building department?
Yeah, but if they're not taking a building permit.
But,
I mean, like Stu Leonard's put the sign up. I mean, they went out there with a machine, dug the holes.
I would be more concerned about being notified.
Yeah, just let me just look back here.
I'm just trying to think under your temporary regulations if that would happen.
This was a separate temporary
Yeah.
regulation, so we may have to address that.
Yeah, that's how I feel, because most of these times, in these instances, these signs go up without, I mean, very few, I'm gonna say maybe 25% of the time I get a call that somebody's gonna erect one of these signs. And,
But could you have them come in to fill out a form?
I
Yeah, I
would
think that's a
prefer
good
something
idea.
like
So
that.
this way you have a contact information? So, say the sign is in the way, at least you got a
Right.
form.
You can use that same language that we used in the other, for what other form, what, they have to come in for like a banner or something?
Real
like that?
estate signs.
The real estate.
Okay.
Yeah.
The problem that I have with them is the signs go up, I'm not notified, and in a lot of cases, they obstruct the sight line. Or, there's an excess of them. There's 2 signs instead of where there should be 1.
So, under the real estate signs, we have a number 6. Real estate signs advertising a lease or rental of a property must be registered. A registration form must be filed with the zoning enforcement officer, so we can incorporate a modified version of that language as number 8. So it'd be temporary
I also think, because it's due to construction, they should have a call before you dig number. It doesn't cost them anything.
Well, that could be incorporated in the, in the registration.
Right, in the form,
Yeah.
right.
Temporary construction. Signs. Must be. Registered. Registration form. So we have the,
Do we want to put a time limit on it with the ability to extend it? There aren't many instances,
it-
but there are circumstances where there may be. a
we actually
project.
already have the 2-year time limit anyway.
It would go with the permit.
But it would go with the zoning approval.
Zoning approval, I mean, right,
Right, so we have the 2-year one, which we extend anyway, so I don't think we really need to have that. So, getting back to that, we'll have temporary construction signs must be registered, and then the wording similar to what's in there now, we'll have the bullet points, except it will reflect the restrictions of this regulations as opposed to the real estate sign regulation. No, that would have to be E2 as well, it's a different one. So we include that, and then we add a bullet point. What was that? Must contact call before you dig?
I'll call before you dig number. Because these signs are 8x4. You gotta get a good size post in the ground to hold it.
Must be contacted. Okay. So we'll incorporate the slightly modified version of the bullet points from proposed 383, 188F. We'll add another bullet point to include the call before you dig. And that should take care of that. And that's all I have at this time. So at this point, I guess the question is, does the commission want to go forward with these proposed regulation changes and send out the referrals and start the procedure to schedule the public hearing?
I'm telling you now, we spent a lot of time trying to
Can you imagine how much time I've spent?
propose, right, as a commission, and you, an unbelievable amount of.
Kinda like what we already
Yeah, Paul, why don't we just leave it the way it is?
But I think that it would be remiss not to go to a public hearing at this point in time and getting the public's input, and let's see if we can hammer out something that makes sense.
Yeah, sounds good.
And we should notify the Chamber of Commerce and the Orange Economic Development Corporation
Yes.
of our public hearing dates, so that the merchants can come and give us their input.
Why don't I send them copies as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll clean this up, or do you have the changes that we're talking about, or why don't we'll get together on it and make sure we have it cleaned up. Is anybody prepared to make a motion?
Quick question.
Yes.
Anything with this grant we gotta do, or no?
I already spoke to Paul about that earlier, and we're going to discuss that, and Paul has told us that he has some knowledge about writing the grant, so we're going to move forward with that, and we'll bring you up to date at the next meeting as to how we've gone through. But yes, we do plan on, you know what, we'll go on with this, and then we'll get back to that grant letter, we'll discuss it in a minute.
So you need a motion to take the proposed text to public hearing.
I believe so.
So moved.
Yes. We have a motion,
Second.
it's been seconded, any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. I guess we could bring it up under new business. We'll revert back to it. We have a letter here that's addressed to the first selectman. It's stating that the State Bond Commission voted on January 5th, 2008 to allocate $500,000 in current fiscal year that ends June 30th, 2008 for grants to municipalities to assist them in updating their plans of conservation and development. We are required by statute to update our plan of conservation and development every 10 years. We are in our 9th year, so Paul is going to look into this, and we're going to work on it and plan on applying for grant money if it's available for us to redo ours, because it is quite costly. So any money that we can get, the study that we've already undertaken is going to be a tremendous benefit with this regards, because that's really going to be the bulk of our changes, if any, to the plan of conservation and development. But then again, it was quite costly last time to produce this. I wouldn't anticipate it being quite as costly, because you were pretty much starting from scratch last time, weren't you, Judy?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah,
The only issue that may be costly is the mapping.
the mapping.
Our mapping is not good at all.
But the mapping is something that we really have to look at in a couple different aspects, because currently Tim Smith has been working on a couple different options for digital mapping, and looking into a couple different things, so it may not pay to have us address our mapping here when we really should be moving into the modern age and digitizing things. It's required by most municipalities. I know in discussions with Tim, one of the biggest things with the digitized records is that you really, if you were to do it yourself, you would have to have a full-time person administrating this whole thing. But as Tim pointed out, the water company does this already, and will do it for they have their whole system digitized. And they will take your, if I understand correctly, they will take your digital information that's submitted to you, to the town, and they will do that for a slight fee. And the fee is very, very modest, once the whole thing's in progress. And again, this is something that we really should discuss, because the burden of this would not be solely on this board. I mean, this is something that the police department would use, the fire department would use, the sanitation department would use, inland wetlands would use. Obviously, we would use it. Virtually everybody could use this, and the technology is amazing. I went to a seminar. What was that? The name of that company that did that? His name was really the software company that did it. Pictometry, yeah. And you can look down right at the lot. For instance, if you were looking at a subdivision, and we had a question, for instance, on the Riccitelli subdivision that we had before, where the river lied in relation to that. Well, with this technology, you could look right at it, and you could, with a computer site at the table, you could look and measure it within incredible accuracy that this river would be 10 feet or 11 feet or 12 feet from this. You could look and actually you can get 3D actual pictures of saying, sometimes we have concerns of what a view might look like from a different house. You can see this thing right there. And the pictometry is great, but it really doesn't reach its full potential unless you have everything tied into a digital imaging system as well. And that's when you can really get accurate. Right now, the pictometry, you look at it and you can zero in just using your own vision to a different lot and so on. But if you had everything digitized, instead of looking at the house, you could superimpose the lot lines to be exactly the proper place. You could look at it and see a shed, for instance, that's in violation, and we could determine that just from the digital imagery and the pictometry industry. So we wouldn't have to go out and measure it. Paul could do this right from his office if he had to say a violation or a potential violation.
Or even to measure the length of cul-de-sacs or
Oh,
property lines.
yeah. And the accuracy is incredible. I mean, down to a foot or so. So it's it's really the way to go. So the mapping, although our mapping here is terrible, I don't know if we'd want to spend much money on the mapping here when something much more effective is really something we should be addressing, as opposed to our individual concerns here. But that being said, we are going to look into the grant money and see if it's applicable and see if we can get some of it. And that concludes our meeting, but I see somebody waiting patiently in the audience. Would you like to address the commission? Nope, yourself, Mrs. Hurley.
I didn't recognize some of the names you referenced.
With regard to?
With regard to the cemetery collapse search,
Scott Allen,
who is,
the Wetlands Enforcement Officer.
in reference to
Yeah, if you,
183, 188C of Ryan and a Mr. Miller.
that would be same person.
Okay,
He's our planning consultant, Brian Miller.
thank you. And then you just referenced a Tim Smith.
Tim Smith is the fire marshal.
Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome. And now,
I'll move to adjourn.
we have a motion.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Meeting is adjourned at 8:25.
I was getting.